Hey guys, so in this video, Dan breaks down one of his favorite overlooked spots. I show an overhead view of the spot, and I show you how the deer travel, where they're bedded, where Dan's setup is in relation to trails, roads, the parking lot, what the cover is like, where the cattails are located, etc. So I show you all those details right at the beginning, and then you get to hear Dan break down the spot completely, tell you what time of year the deer use it and why, tell you how he found this spot. You get to learn how the changing cover over the years affects the deer's travel. You get to learn how the thermals affect it in this situation, what winds they're bedding on, etc. So a lot of valuable things. And then after that, a lot of B-style hunters that were at the workshop asked questions and fully kind of scratched that itch in their brain of what else do I need to know about this spot to apply to my situation. And Dan answers every single one of those questions in deep detail. Because of that, this is a long, unedited video where you get to hear each of those questions and you get to hear them answered to their fullest extent and any little tangents or cool stories that Dan may tell along the way. That being said, at the beginning of this video are those overhead visuals for about the first 30 to 45 seconds, and then you might not want to stare at your screen the rest of the time. You could listen to it like a podcast if you prefer, or you can watch as I pan around and go to the areas that Dan points to as he explains them. Either way, listen or watch, this video is going to contain a lot of very, very useful content, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Drop a comment about what you might ask Dan in this spot as well, and I'll see if we can get them answered for you.
I like this spot because it's right next to the parking lot. When I first started hunting here about 30 years ago, these trees went like this. You can see the parking lot. And it's changed a little over time. But I've killed some really big bucks right here. Kind of overlooked right next to the road. The buck that was dubbed the 400-pound slob was killed out of that willow tree right there. The land border's right behind a tree. If you see where that dead tree is, that's like a half a tree. That's about the land border right there. It probably finally fell off. But there's a land border that goes like this and actually hits the access trail just up there. And really that trail that we're walking on is just an access trail. So there's an access of land to get to the DNR land further out. So this is officially owned by DNR. So people look at this as an access. It's kind of overlooked. Nowadays with the Onyx and stuff, people see this a little more than they used to. But still it gets overlooked. The only person I ever ran into hunting here turned out to be somebody that came to the workshops. Otherwise I've always had this to myself. I've done most of my hunting out of that willow tree, but more often now I set back a little further because I get spotted there a lot. And I like to sit over by that deadfall or a pine tree there, like cedar tree. There's a little hole in there. But I like to be right here mostly because they come up in here. You can see where they stage, where all the rubs are. This is the first year in a long time that those rubs aren't just ripped up. But I do know that two of the bucks that I was hunting right here got killed across the street this year, early in the season. So that's probably why there ain't as many rubs right here. The bucks would bed in the marsh there and would bed under the trees, and a lot of them would come out of that pile of brush right over there, which is only what 40 yards or so from the access trail where everybody walks. And that trail gets walked every single day. As you can see, there's a car there today that's going to be walking around. And a lot of the bigger animals came out from underneath the trees just inside of the dogwood on the private land. Like if you look at where that big tree is right over there, it's dead because it's an ash tree. But right at the base of that, stuff would always get up. And they might get up and go to the crops over on that private land at some point in time when they're looking for, like, say, corn or something. And maybe there's something better on the other side. Generally they come this way because the neighbors have food plots and stuff. There's more managed land across the road and back in. There's a hunting preserve right kitty corner to here where they've got high dollar memberships and grow deer to bigger sizes, and those deer come over here back and forth. So these deer in a lot of cases are going for those food plots and stuff. So it's a matter of when those food plots are prime. A lot of what I'll do is check these spots. If I don't know what's going on, like say I find a spot now, we're scouting, we find this and I'm like, well, what time do they bed here? What time do they come through here? Well, one thing I'm looking at is the rubs. Now normally on normal years, this is just tore up right here, where they stage. You can see the old rubs, the historical ones. This year there really wasn't nothing over here, so it never got ripped up. There was 3 big bucks over here that I knew of this year, and 2 of them got shot across the street. The third one is still running. Normally this is all ripped up. That'll give you an inclination. I mean, if this is all ripped up, I would say probably I would lean towards that. But that still wouldn't be a positive answer. So what I like to do is a spot like this is hunt it 3 times. Once early season, once like pre-rut, and once late season, and see what kind of sign I see when I come in. And if I get here and there's no sign, I might just back out and go hunt someplace else. But I'll check it 3 times a year to hunt. You know, a lot of times when I go back to these spots, I don't take like the path like everybody else, like walk right down that straight path. I'll go in and I'll follow a transition and I'll look at the sign and the different, you know, terrain features. And if I see something hot, I won't make it to the spot that I was planning on going to, because the hot sign will trump a spot where I'm suspecting here.
When you find these staging areas, are you typically thinking that these bucks are making that sign where they go to eat or they go to bed? What's your
That's a very good question. I think a sign like this is mostly in the evenings. And the reason for that is when these bucks come back in the morning, they do it differently. In the evening, they tend to just get up and move down the main trails coming out of bedding and going towards food sources or towards does or whatever they're moving to. But in the morning, they're suspicious of their bedding areas and they tend to go to the downwind side. So they come in a little different. So you'll see them like swing into this stuff and then come in where they can smell where they're going first. So when I hunt in the mornings, I tend to hunt a little further back. Now in this spot, I really couldn't hunt further back because the road's right there. But hunting right adjacent to the bedding, you're way better off in the evenings than you are in the mornings, because in the mornings they come back different. When in the evenings, just about always, if there's a buck in there, it comes past me. Whether or not I spook them or something like that is different, but they generally come down the trails I expect. Now sometimes you'll have one trail that comes out of bedding, which makes it easy. Sometimes you'll have multiples. And then you kind of got to do the detective work when there's multiples about why is he leaving one way versus another. And usually it's time frames, you know, like sometimes they might be going towards does when it's starting to get towards rut. And sometimes they might be going towards corn or at some period, maybe acorns. So when you get into an area, you kind of see the sign, and whichever exit has the fresher sign is probably where they're coming out to.
Here. So was that your access when you walked in, or were you coming in off the road, or how were you?
The access that we just came in is the way I came in, yep. I feel like if those deer come past here, when they come through here, they're going to smell that I was here.
Yep.
So I don't care about how I come in here as long as they're not going to hit my scent while I'm hunting, you know, and then I just leave and then this spot is burnt. As a matter of fact, I really don't try to hide my scent at all too much, because if I come in here and hunt, usually what I'll do is, to back up a little bit, is I'll hunt this area because I know there's a buck in here. So I'll hunt that buck down. I'll come through here and I'll hunt all the primary little bedding areas. And as I do that, I'm kind of stacking that deer into areas, because when he comes out here, smells that I was here, like say he beds here 2 days after I was here, he ain't gonna want to bed here. So he's gonna move to one of the other spots. And you kind of narrow him down, you know, and at the end you're getting better hunts than you got at the beginning.
So what type of wind are you looking for if you hunt here? And if, say your wind is blowing back towards the road while you're coming in, do you see them going towards crop field on the other side, walking into the wind rather than coming this way? Good
question. So what I see in with these bedded deer is they just get up and go towards food or does or whatever. I've had people, well-known hunters, tell me that they always move nose to wind, or they always move wind to tail. But those same people, you ask them, well, did you ever hunt when the wind's in your face? No, because they don't move that way, you know. But I've shot deer, trophy bucks, on every single wind you can imagine. Cross winds, I don't really see that much of a difference. The one thing I do see is if the wind's totally in your advantage, they seem to be a little more hesitant. They come out a little slower. But when you're this close to bedding, they generally make it to you. You know, with that said, we get deer that get up in that dogwood, you'll get glimpses of them or you'll hear them walking around, and it'll be an hour before dark, but by the time you're getting a shot at them, it's actually closing time. And you're this close. This is a little further than I like to set up, but this is the first spot, or the closest spot I can get to where they can't hear, smell, or see me. So to go back to your question, the wind doesn't matter as long as it's not blowing to the deer in the evening. In the morning, they're going to tend to go in with the wind to nose.
Are you saying that the bedding's over here and the wind is going towards the road and that's how you set up?
This wind is perfect.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at
Okay.
whatever wind's to my
Southwest.
advantage. I'm not hunting here if it's blowing at them. That's the only time I'm not hunting.
You concerned with thermals with the standing water and all?
Um,
Not enough of
If you're real close to the water, it might make a difference.
it. Sure.
I don't think it would be much of a difference.
Right on.
Are you walking this, like, I know we access it this way, but like for me, I'm walking along that edge. So if I can only see you maybe walking through this edge and all of a sudden you see the sign here and then you say, hey, I need to keep this in mind. Is that kind of the approach you took to find this spot where you're walking all these edges and then all of a sudden
I
you came
found
to
this
this spot here?
because I saw that really big buck that I shot here. I saw him.
Okay.
And I actually watched that buck from the parking lot right through here because these trees weren't really here at the time, and you can see him through spots. And he would come here in the evening and stage, and then that's why I found this spot. But if you're talking about when you're following a transition coming in, I'm looking for terrain features along that transition on a map, but some of those terrain features aren't going to be real obvious that'll hold a deer, right? You have to physically see it. So walking those transitions will help you a lot. You'll be able to see things like this, and after a while it'll start to click with you more because it's really repetitive. It's the same kind of things over and over again. You're walking, you're like, I remember bedding in this spot over here. I remember, you know what I'm saying?
So if I'm walking, like I've never been here before, so I'm going to be looking for these edges, which is I see right here. You know, you see the tree line go out, and
Yep.
I'm walking this edge, and all of a sudden I see these rubs here.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, maybe I should start. Maybe there's some kind of bedding
Mm-hmm.
that I should be looking for, and if these rubs aren't fresh, then obviously it's not the time I should be hunting them. But then maybe at some time during the season, just check it to see if they're fresh again. Then,
Yeah, well,
then
historical
is
rubs
that how
have
that is?
a big factor too. I mean, like you think about acorn areas that drop every other year. You have a lot of guys, and we're going to look at a spot like that next. You'll have a lot of guys will go in there and it's ripped up with rubs. And they'll be like, oh, you know, and they're spring scouting, I got to hunt this next year. And then they go in there next year, they don't see no deer come in there, like, oh. Then the next spring they go scout it, it's ripped up again. Well, they're coming in there on the years that there's acorns, you know, and they're not putting two and two together. So if you go into an acorn flat and it's ripped up and those acorns are dropping every other year, you got to wait 2 years to hunt it, right?
Okay, yeah.
So the rubs don't happen on accident. I mean, all these big bucks, when they do something, they do it for a reason. You know what I mean? Nothing is haphazard with mature bucks. So when you find sign like that, it's there for a reason. Now the trouble is, you think about a mature buck, probably, especially on public land, 95% of his movement is at night, in darkness. So probably 95% of the sign he lays down is in darkness. So the only sign I'm concentrating on is on the edge near bedding, right? So if I were you and I came up this transition and I was looking for sign and I saw that, I'd be looking at this and I'd see the trails going through here. A little harder to see with the snow on here, but you see trails coming out of here and you see it all going into there. And I'd look at my phone and I'd zoom in on the cattails and I'd start making out trails coming and spidering off of those trees. And I'd like, and I'd be looking for a tree and I'd have it in the back of my mind for when I came back and hunted.
Dude, I have a question. As far as where the deer kind of focusing their bedding on, are you seeing them bed in this thick dogwood brush, the actual cattails, or kind of underneath the trees?
Well, what I see is they want cover from the light.
Okay.
They don't want to be in open daylight. And you're going to find beds that don't look like that. They'll be out in the open. Those might be like periodical beds or night beds where they just lay down and bed after they fed or something. When they bed for, you know, a number of hours in daylight, they like to tuck themselves into leaves and stuff. So you see them in the thicker cover, but on the edges of it. And you see them in spots like this. Most of this is underwater. there's like little bubbles of dirt where there's tree sticks. The cattails are mostly in water. So when I see the deer come out, they're coming out right from the base of a tree or like out of a pile of brush like that.
Good question. If you're on a spot like this, public land, and you do get winded by a 2.5, 3.5-year-old buck, how long will that buck know there's like a human presence in that area?
That's hard to say. I think bucks are kind of probably like people. They probably, every one of them is different. You know, I've jumped bucks and you never see them in that spot ever again. And I've had bucks come back the next day. So it's really
Hard to say.
yeah, it's
I would always throw another hunt. If you saw a buck,
correct. Yeah.
throw another hunt at it.
Yeah.
You'd probably give up on it.
Do you hunt dogwoods the same as you would like these cattails? Like if this was completely dogwoods, and do you find that they like that better for bedding, like since it's a little taller and thicker?
So all the lowland is the same. What I like about the cattails is that the cattails really show it to you. So if this was a swamp and it was all like, this is all tamarack and stuff, but it still had those trees out there and those low spots and stuff, the deer would be in the same spot. It'd just be a hell of a lot harder to see. So this is a good teaching terrain because you can see it real obvious. Like when you look at a map, you can see the points going down into the cattails real well and stuff. If it was tamaracks versus cattails, the deer would still be bedding in the same spot. If it was dogwood versus cattails, it'd still be in the same spot. It'd just be harder to look over the top of it to see it.
What made you decide what tree to set up in versus that tree or the cedar or these trees here? Was it the hot sign or was it like how the terrain was moving the deer through that
But
area?
when I set up there, I was watching that deer come through here and he kept coming in front of that tree through here. And I came in here and tried to find a place to set up, and that was basically the best spot I could find at the time.
So has it ever happened where you set up and you're not in bow range and you have one that walks, say, 50, 60, 70 yards out from you very often?
Sure. I wouldn't say very often, but it happens.
Okay.
It happens. You get in the wrong spot. Hopefully you're downwind. Hopefully they don't catch your scent trail, and hopefully you can go at them, the next day.
Yeah.
Even if they smell me, if they spook out of there, like Josh said, I'll give them one more day.
Okay.
Just in case they've got the attitude to come back. I've seen where you're out here and some pheasant hunter comes wandering in and goes after a cackling bird or something, and you see a buck get up and move, and watch them go through and go right back in bed there after they leave. And you see other deer that go and you see them going over the hill over there running like a maniac. Everyone's different.
You set up in that pine right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I send the tree out here, it's a little bit more in the open, but then that's farther back. It's
Yeah,
just,
I have to have a lot of sign over there to do that. Or, what I really like is to get into that tree behind him right there. Get into the brush and get on the ground here. It's just, yeah, it's just
okay.
getting in a tree here is pretty
closer
difficult.
to the edge, right?
What's that?
Being closer to the edge, right? Because that's why you're choosing this tree.
I just want to be where these deer come through
Yeah.
and have a shot opportunity. A lot of it's windy dependent too. I might hunt in a different spot because of the wind.
Because I was wondering if there's a difference between being right out here in the open to back a little bit farther, like in the thicker.
You mean
area.
back here?
Yeah.
Well, they tend to hit this first cover and kind of stop.
Yeah. Okay. So then that's why. Yeah.
Something else is like whenever you were hunting this, some of this stuff wasn't an option, right? Like
Correct. This was just low grass back in the day. When I shot that big buck. That is correct.
Question. So you said this year there were 3 bucks in here, right? That you knew of. How did you figure that out exactly? Like what tipped you off? Was it a sign or
glassing, shining, cameras.
Okay.
I mean, if you follow my content, you don't see a lot of that because if I show too much of it, all the locals get onto the stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But was it? It must have been summertime already. Too.
Yeah, and some of those deer I was following for years. The problem with that is too, is a lot of times I don't even hear about those deer getting shot till the season's over. And that was the case this year. With both bucks, a nice 8-pointer I was after got shot across the street, and a 12-pointer that I was after back there that was really big that I've been after for years got shot across the street.
So what exactly led you to believe that they were bedding here in particular, though?
There's only so many spots like that.
Sure.
And that might sound weird. If you go through this marsh, like I've been in every inch of this marsh, obviously. I might know of, off the top of my head, maybe 300 different bedding areas. But there's probably only about 30 that I've ever seen a mature buck come out of. You know, and the smaller bucks will bed in different spots. Big bucks put everything together. It's like they become a different animal. As they get older, they start really being careful about having a perfect setup for where they bed and stuff. And you don't always know all the reasons, but you notice that certain spots hold big bucks year after year. I mean, there's one spot in this marsh where 8 years in a row, on opening day of gun, I shot a nice buck on opening day, 8 years in a row, coming out of a bedding area. There's another spot where I shot 4 mature bucks in one bedding area, and we killed 2 more with friends of mine, so 6 out of one area. But you don't see them all over the place. They sit in specific areas, and sometimes you got to hunt an area down to figure that out too. You know, you get better at it the more time you spend in it.
About bedding, when you find the bedding, like let's say you see the actual bed, and you're doing this during the season, so you know that is a good bed to maybe hunt. Like you just come across it and you're doing your in-season scouting and you come across a bed and you see it. Now, let's say because we're out of season now, and if you find a bed like just a little bit out of season, is that still a bed that you should be considering to hunt maybe during season?
Good question.
Because you said that
the thing is right now they're winter bedding. Usually at this time of the year, I mean, this is an exceptional year. Usually at this time of the year, we don't have deer back here. We have a few. They winter out in the crop fields. Well, they also change their bedding. I mean, you look at this, there's not too many spots they can bed, so they're kind of in winter bedding right now. So finding a bed in the snow wouldn't help you much at all. It might. I mean, it might be a spot that they bed year round. But for the most part, when I'm spring scouting, what I'm looking at is after the snow melts, I'm looking at the beds from last year.
Okay, so if I come across a bed, like I'm gonna start, like there's times that I've seen like hair in the bed, and there's times I haven't seen hair in the bed, and whether it's in season or out of season, but if it's more like if I'm seeing the bed during season, that's but you're saying like they bed at different times of the year, so I don't want to be hunting that bed if it's the wrong time of year for the season.
And that's a hard thing. You got to kind of take some guess.
So you just guess that by hunting it through the season and see how it goes, right?
One of the best things you can do is keep a journal.
Yeah.
You'll find that, this will sound bizarre, but you'll find that the dates just seem to be almost to the day, year after year, that you see animals in the same spots. I see that on the cameras too. You run a lot of cameras, right, Josh?
Yeah.
You ever see that where you see the same buck show up the same time frame?
Oh yeah.
All the time.
Because I'm wondering, I'm noticing beds now, and I've plotted them on a map, and I'm seeing how they can be kind of in a general area, but you know, some of them obviously are does, and so I'm trying to learn where the actual doe bedding is on where I'm hunting. I never really, you always hear about that, but I never really figure that out. So I'm coming across stuff like that now, and I just kind of making a reference. Oh well, why is there hair in the bed this time of year? Whereas I guess this time of year they can start losing their hair, like if it's later after the season. So you might see that. But I also saw it. I'm just starting to see it now, just the last month or so. Like in last month, I was starting to see hair in the beds, and whereas earlier in the season, you wasn't seeing that. Like in
I think a lot of that has to do with their shedding right now.
So it's later as the season progresses, and even after the season, they're shedding more. But
I wouldn't put too much stock in the hair in the bed. All that does is tell you, confirm that it's a deer's bed in there.
And that's what I was looking for, to confirm that. So that was helpful. Yeah. Okay. But so it's just you're making have a journal of beds, and then you just want to
just have a journal of, you know, when you
a year.
Everything you learn about a spot. Even when you go into scout, if you do a journal, because you'll find like You go in, you find the bedding area. Here's what I do: is if I find a good buck bedding area and I back up from it, I'll take a look from the bedding area and I'll be like, okay, this buck's coming out this direction. How close can I get without being heard, seen, or smelled? And I want to be as close as possible before those trails start branching, before it starts getting dark, right? So I want to get as close as possible, and then I want to look at some trees. So in your journal, you might want to mark down what winds you could use, if you had to use a different tree for a different wind, that kind of thing. Where the bedding is, how high to get in the tree, what you need for equipment, that kind of thing. You'd be surprised how much you forget before a season goes by, especially if you look at a lot of them. And a lot of guys will do this, and they'll find some spot, they'll walk into it after doing this workshop or whatever, and they'll find some spot that is just ripped up. Beds are there, and they'll be like, oh, this is exactly what we're talking about. I got this, I'm gonna kill this deer. And they'll think, I've got it. And the next year they go there and that deer don't show up, and they're like, well, what the heck? You gotta realize that I find dozens and dozens of those spots, and still it takes me a season or so to kill a big buck. They're not always there. You gotta play that cat and mouse game. You gotta hit the timing right. So it's not as easy as it appears. You still have to put a lot of work into it, and you gotta find a lot of these spots and set them up. So with that vast knowledge of spots, when you learn all those areas those deer could be, if you're not doing notes on it, you're gonna get confused, and you're gonna get where they're gonna start to blend together.
Dan,
not to mention that you'll be hunting an area, and then at the end of the season, this happens to me every now and then, you get to the end of the season, and then you look back and you notice, and like, oh man, I never hunted that spot. You know what I mean?
I feel like I struggle in differencing, like, the overlooked spots I find a lot are spots that take pressure.
That take pressure to put them there?
To get the bucks to start bedding up in there, right?
Okay.
Like in here, I know, like we're close to the parking lot, but they're not necessarily like, you know, they're not busting out of there every time a guy comes out of the parking lot, right? But like some of the spots I find that are like that, whereas like you've talked about making a circle around them, it takes a lot of pressure to get those bucks pushed in there.
Mm-hmm.
So this area, I guess, like, if you hadn't hunted it before and you were gonna put a camera in here, would you be more worried about putting the camera in here and like getting a buck, or like are you trying to figure out where the guys are hunting at?
The camera would be, my only concern would be the buck.
Okay.
So if I'm looking at a spot, I already think people aren't hunting it. Because people pressure will kill a spot real quick.
Right.
Which is part of the reason I only hunt a spot.
Right, so
1
that's
to 3
why I would
times
like,
a year.
yeah, I would want to know more if guys are coming in here.
I did over 100 sits this year, and I think I sat the same tree maybe 5 or 6 times.
Right, so you don't want to waste your time and come into an area where a guy's going to be.
Right.
Which is why I would want to like make sure nobody's coming in here.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
If I was going to put a camera here, I'd put it right here in the hunting area. I wouldn't go into the bedding.
Right.
I'd put it right here, and I'd use a cell camera type, or I'd leave the camera there to soak for a year. And that's a good point too. Is one of the questions was, how do you know when that 2-week period is? Well, if you had a camera here for a year soaking,
yeah, you'd know.
Next year you'd know for sure, right? And otherwise, without that camera, it can take you 5-6 years to really get that down.
Especially with like crop rotation and stuff like that, because it probably changes a little bit, right?
Right. So the cameras help dramatically.
Yeah.
Anything else?
So Dan, if you got spots that you have, they're saying those deer won't repeat the same, like you talk about the guy going in, seeing the sign, saying, okay, I'm going to hunt this next year, and acorns aren't dropping, so the deer doesn't come in. But a lot of times there are spots where the deer will be there on the same day the year after.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sometimes saying, all right, well, I had this historical knowledge of this deer being here on October 18th. You go next year, October 18th, the deer's not there. Say 2 years later, are you going to try it again? Or are you just going to make the assumption?
Depends. I mean, part of that's the detective work.
Right.
You know, do you think it's because of acorns? Do you think,
right.
Or you think maybe, that deer didn't come back for a different reason? Just like it's not historical.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of factors that go into all of that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's move on.